Did anything come to mind when I said
something
that?
came to mind. Something rather defensible for me that I was like, what's something I would be willing to follow down a rabbit hole?
Yeah. Oh, before we actually talk about that, I do like to give a test with the trail mix.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
So there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors of like M&M knockoffs in this bag. If we were to, we could both guess how many of each color in the bag, right?
Okay, sure.
You could, if you just had to guess how many yellows are in here, what would you guess?
Let's see. Can I look at the bag?
Yeah, totally.
Sure. Let's see. If I had to guess, let's see. Maybe between 15 and 20.
15 and 20?
Maybe 15 to 20.
Okay.
I guess closer to 15.
Got there just from looking at it, kind of course, yeah. And that, maybe I might guess like 12.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about this is, some people would say that there's 3 options. Either you're right and I'm wrong, I'm right and you're wrong, or we're both wrong.
Right.
Do you think we could both be right?
No, I do not think that we could both be right about this particular question. Sure.
Some people might say, like, you know, let's say we took out the M&Ms and we counted how many yellow ones there were, and you were right. There's 15 of them in there. And let's say someone else came by and they said, no, there's actually 13 M&Ms there.
Mm-hmm.
Would you feel comfortable in saying that they're wrong? Maybe not to their face, but...
You know, if I myself did indeed count 15, then I would feel comfortable doing that. But I might feel uncomfortable ruminating as to why they came to a different conclusion later that night when I'm trying to fall asleep.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah, reality is certainly a shared experience, sure. And like, I was actually talking about this yesterday. One time I angered my brother. He's very not into thought experiments and hypotheticals, and I one time posed a hypothetical situation to him about being on an island, and say there were 2 people, you know, yourself and 2 other people. They're both schizophrenic, but say that their hallucinations directly align, and that and also that their hallucinations aren't inconsistent with the way that you see reality, such that they're able to, you know, reasonably go about having this belief in reality, and it not intersecting with the quote-unquote real world in a way that they have to like confront that it might be wrong. So if you're in that situation, and he got very frustrated with me, but I said, then you're actually the schizophrenic, and they're not schizophrenic.
Because you're outnumbered.
Because you're outnumbered, because reality is shared. So and he just said, but that would never happen. And I said, I know it's a hypothetical. And he said, but why should we even talk about it if it's never going to happen? And I didn't really have an answer.
That's a good one
for that, actually.
I'm gonna use that one because I love hypotheticals.
It's very to the point, because it's just you on an island, 2 other people, you're out. They see the same dragon flying around in the sky or whatever, and that's reality. And now you're the schizophrenic because you don't see Puff the Magic Dragon in the sky or whatever.
Yeah. Very cool. I like to give that just to see what people's like conception of truth is, I guess. You know what I mean? Before we start a conversation about what they think is true. But you said
I picked
something.
A good belief because it's kind of foundational. It's kind of a foundational. I mean, I guess it's kind of epistemic in of itself, like just as far as beliefs go. But yeah, the belief is just that, and I don't know how best to word it succinctly, but I guess I would explain it this way by...
Yeah, take your time explaining anything.
Sure, yeah. I'll always be very skeptical of anybody trying to talk to me about, say, the exact shape and nature of God, or anything that is fundamentally outside of our realm of experience.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound all that revolutionary, but I'm just saying that, you know, for me, if something is outside of my realm of... This is kind of like a very fancy version of if I can't see it and hear it and stuff, then it's not real. But it's not that it's not real. It's more that
you can't claim to know it's real.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. So anybody claiming to have knowledge about something that I see as fundamentally outside of our realm of experience, well, I mean, first of all, I won't believe them. But second of all, I also won't spend. I try to, and this is something that I think about in trying to come to terms with. There are things that I don't know and that I will never know because, and I have to put that away in a separate drawer and not stay up at night. Or my goal, rather, is to not waste a lot of time worrying about that because I do see that as kind of, sure, I could have speculation that I feel relatively good about, but I'll always sort of be questioning that belief system that I've built.
Because of things you don't know and maybe unknowable things.
It is trying, that speculation I'm referring to, say that speculation is the nature of God. Like I used to be Christian when I was younger. I was raised Christian. So, that belief system speaks to, in my opinion, things that are fundamentally outside of my realm of experience. And therefore, I will always be mistrustful of them. I'll always be skeptical. Or rather, there's this pitfall that I could always fall into doubt. But yeah, and so I just try not to, I think about this because I am a very curious person and it drives me crazy that there are questions that are functionally unanswerable.
Right. Okay.
And so this is to quiet my mind with those things and say, am I dwelling on something that I'll just never know?
So, what you brought up at first was that you don't claim to know, but it's not only that you don't claim to know things that are outside of, what did you say, your realm?
I would say realm of experience.
Realm of experience, okay.
And I would actually qualify that as realm of possible experience. So in other words, in life, like it's not in my realm of possible experience to, say, witness God or witness heaven or anything like that.
Okay.
For me, just taking the Christian example, because this is where this really sprung from.
Right.
God hasn't spoken to me directly, but like maybe theoretically I would die and find out then.
But you're saying it's outside of the realm of possible experience for God to speak to you.
Or, I mean, yeah, I guess that, that's funny, because I guess I can't, and I wouldn't rule that out. I wouldn't rule that out, but it's more of a thing of, if that hasn't happened yet, I'm not going to bank on that happening one day. Like, it's just something that's, until God does speak to me, that is in the drawer.
You're using all of your past experience of God never speaking to you as evidence for the fact that he won't, maybe.
Well, predictive, no.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to be prescriptive with God not speaking to me. It's purely, I'm a very descriptive guy. So for me, it's just that he hasn't. And so until that, basically cross that bridge when I get there. But for now, that, matters to do with religion and things like that and the afterlife.
Okay.
Things that have been outside of my realm of experience. That's just in this particular drawer, and should God talk to me, then it's out of the drawer. And now it still can function within that little belief of mine. But again, it's not prescriptive. I'm not banking on the fact that he's not going to talk to me, but I'm also not banking on the fact that he will. It's just that is an unknowable question until literally something like divine intervention changes it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that maybe might have answered the question that I'm about to ask, but so what is an example of something that falls outside of your realm of possible experiences?
Something that falls outside of my realm of possible experiences, for instance, for me, is like being able to contextualize life. And that's why I reference something like religion, because religion helps to contextualize life and answer these questions that I see as kind of functionally unanswerable. So that's really I refer to separate things in the drawer. It's really just one thing in the drawer. It's like, what the fuck is life? And I have no idea what the answer is to that.
It's a big one.
And it drives me crazy. I mean, I'm walking around on this beautiful day thinking, what is all of this? I have no idea. I wish that I had answers to those questions. I wish that I could look to God or look somewhere else, even to science, whatever. But that it drives me crazy. So this is something that helps me, quiet that confusion and curiosity.
Okay.
Burning curiosity about
what is life?
The context of life. Because my nature is always to back up. I see things clearly from a bird's eye view, and things get very muddled for me when you get into messy details.
Right.
I'm always wanting to take steps back, and I cannot. I can only abstract to a certain point, and then I hit this wall of what I see. It's almost like visually that's like beyond the realm of my experience is like the wall that I'm hitting.
Yeah.
And I can speculate as much as I want, but
you're trapped in a certain sense.
Yeah, and
in yourself. Yeah.
And also we're kind of putting a finite, because this used to be very important to me and something I thought about much more regularly. Mm-hmm. But I wish that I was wording it better, but it's also that we were trying to define it, but I see this as being kind of undefinable.
Okay.
Like I think that is its definition, is that it is stuff that we cannot know.
What is undefinable?
Well, this is what I mean, is that like while we were talking about a specific example of God talking to me, will he or will he not? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if he ended up talking to me, then that is something that would become
part of your experience,
definable. Yeah.
Okay.
But for me, it's just it's whatever point beyond. It definitionally is stuff that's unexplainable, and I guess what I try to do is to correctly identify as best I can things that might be unexplainable, so I don't spend my time spinning my wheels about it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's perfectly reasonable. I'm curious. What is it? You think about. You spend a lot of time thinking about what is maybe unexplainable, so that you aren't wasting your time thinking about it, or you're not going crazy thinking about it. What are the characteristics of something unexplainable?
Well, no, I mean, I think that and this is the point that I'm making very poorly, is that like that is its only attribute. Or is that, its only attribute rather, is that it is something, I would define something that's unexplainable as something of which I can have no knowledge about.
Maybe something unfalsifiable?
Unfalsifiable? No, I mean, I wouldn't use that. It's something that is definitionally out. I think the real definition, and then like what the individual words in the definition mean, have big implications, but it's really that outside of the realm of potential experience. Because I see... my conscious experience being endemic to life and being alive, and then, for instance, I see death, because this is another thing. I have a fear, not being religious, not having a context for life, very afraid of death at times, because I have no way of explaining it. So this is me trying to remind myself, that's what death is, definitionally.
Right.
Something that you cannot explain. It's something that I cannot think about. Like that's its only definition, is that it is something beyond my consciousness, beyond my conscious experience.
Right. So, I mean, there maybe are things about death that we do know about or can't explain through maybe observation of people dying. Maybe the fact that all of our brain functions seem to stop. We no longer breathe. We decompose. Sure. All of these sorts of things.
Your conscious experience ends. Is what that would seem to imply.
Yeah.
Based on our current understanding of the things that compose consciousness, being cognitive hardware. In other words, my I am not somebody who believes that I have any kind of immaterial
soul.
No, because and that's not like, I don't see that as a pessimistic or sad thing. I just, sometimes I am, unfortunately, pragmatic. But for me, my thinking right now, while it is intangible to me, does have a physical representation. And while we're not there yet in our understanding of in the field of cognitive science or in neuroscience, just because we can't grasp it doesn't mean that there isn't a physical manifestation of the thoughts that I'm thinking right now.
Right.
And we're getting closer. So, I do feel quite confident in that. When this cognitive hardware that I have up here decomposes, stops fire, the neurons stop firing, I do feel quite confident that my conscious experience will end, which then implies to me only one fact that I can know about death, and that is that it will probably be very similar to my experience before I was born.
Yeah.
And that is the only thing that I can know about death.
Okay.
And I don't know how I feel about that, because there was no pain before I was born. There was, it wasn't boring. I wasn't like sitting around for an eternity being like, this sucks.
Right.
I wish there was more to do. So it's neither negative nor positive, but it's a true neutral that still is kind of scary to confront.
Yeah, still terrifying.
Still very
for me
terrifying.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so earlier you were saying that, I mean, before we talked about how consciousness might and maybe probably is related to the brain or rooted in the brain. You said that there's something, that death is one of those things that is unexplainable. But maybe what we just talked about is maybe the one thing that you probably know about death.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about death that you don't know that is unexplainable, maybe, that terrifies you?
I mean, I
the possibility
honestly,
of an afterlife?
Yes. I think that if I was alone on the island without, sans the two schizophrenics or whatever in the thought experiment, if I was alone on an island and I was just by myself and just kind of, if I had the same way of thinking that I do now, I think I would be a lot less scared of death. And I think it's just, what really freaks me out is all the opinions that people have about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, I think if I was living on an island without anybody else, I mean, first of all, I'd go crazy. But if I didn't,
of course, yeah.
To me, it would be a very natural, very intuitive idea that there wouldn't be anything, beyond death. And I'm just kind of surprised that that's not how everybody feels,
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a sad thing, but we have our conscious experience. There's a brief window.
Yeah.
I wasn't having this conscious experience before I was born. So why do I think that there would be any kind of conscious experience after I'm born?
Right.
That's the disconnect for me. But many, many people seem quite convinced that there's more to it than that. And that kind of freaks me out because, that's not how my mind works, and that doesn't make sense to me, and we're afraid of the things that we don't understand.
Okay.
So a death that isn't just the absence of a conscious experience scares me because that I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to my inability to contextualize life, because it's very possible that there is something beyond death because I can't contextualize life. So I don't know what context within which I'm having this conscious experience. At my death, I mean, I would be not surprised. I would like to think I wouldn't be surprised if I woke up and a buddy was next to me and was like, "How was that DMT trip?" Or you know what I mean? Or maybe not. That's our.
You ever done it?
No, that's our metaphor.
I'm scared too.
Yeah, yeah, that seems a bridge too far. Because I have done similar things, but not quite that. But maybe not DMT or not a buddy next to me on the couch. Maybe it's like two spirits floating in the Ethernet. Like the ether.
Right.
I don't know what it would look like, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was just some sort of I think trivial experience for some eternal being. I couldn't, because I can't contextualize life, I can't rule that out.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is something that I feel I've had a similar experience with, in the sense that I was raised more or less secular. I had some family who was religious, but it did at that time seem intuitive to me that there was no afterlife. I didn't have any knowledge about how a consciousness is tied to a mind, which is tied to different functions in the brain and all this kind of stuff. It just seemed like that's what happens. I didn't experience anything before I was born.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're pretty fresh off that.
Yeah,
I mean, you're pretty fresh off not the absence of all experience. So
right.
I mean, it does seem intuitive that's kind of, it would be similar.
The older I've gotten, I think ideas like reincarnation have become not very sound to me, but maybe
appealing.
Intuitive.
Okay.
In the sense that I've been experiencing for longer than I have when I was 6, and descriptions of experiences that entail that you are a reincarnated soul seem to resonate with me, like meeting someone and feeling like you've known them for a long time, or something like this.
I have a pessimistic view on those kinds of feelings, but I mean, I do. There is a similar allure for me as well.
It is. I describe it mainly as an allure.
Sure.
But yeah, so really interested in the claim you were making, which is that correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's basically that there are certain things that are unknowable.
Sure, yeah.
Was that it?
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to make it succinct. How confident are you, let's say on a scale from 0 to 100, that is the case?
100, because it's not just that that's the claim I'm making. That is actually kind of the premise on which I have been making claims. So it's not so much like, how valid do I think that is? Well, pretty foundational, as it turns out, because that's kind of, I don't investigate that much. Like, that's something to me that's like a kind of faith belief in that. That's something I presume. And this gets into the whole thing of like, whether you're religious or not, you're like, faith has nothing to do with religion. Like, I mean, it does insofar as religion utilizes faith, but faith is foundational to the human condition in a way that is separate from religion. Or you could also argue that
how in the sense that if we claim to know anything, we're making some sort of
I could put it this way, like maybe do you assume that there might be trees behind you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's faith, because until you actually turn around, and see that for yourself, there is, it's a question of like verification. So it's we're constantly this is my point, is that we're constantly in a state of
before we go there.
Sure.
Could you give a definition for faith?
For faith is, and I guess, what I was going into was hinting at a definition. I don't know how quite I would word it, but it's just the idea of like, presuming, or, not actively interrogating the very unstable nature of what we call reality. Because basically, like people say that they're skeptics in a philosophical sense, or will do thought exercises about why free will doesn't exist. Yeah. But at the same time, these people aren't paralyzed to act. They make decisions every day. And so this is why they're actually kind of discounted by some very practically
free will exists, even though they may be a determinist.
Right.
On a philosophical level.
It's just more of a matter of like, what is the nature of free will? It's not whether, so I would always be skeptical of the skeptics saying free will doesn't exist, because it's like, at the end of the day, in a functional sense, they're still making decisions in a sense, or in the way of, when people say free will, that's what they're referring to, is that person who's saying free will doesn't exist, getting up every day and making, all kinds of decisions throughout the day.
Or it's that's a faith-based action.
I think that it's I think that we're engaged with faith more so than we are not. In other words, it would take a lot of mental energy for you to question whether or not, without turning around, the trees are there. In that, not that specifically, but if that were your approach to everything that was not immediately verifiable to you, you would stay sitting right here until you withered away. Yeah. And I really do believe that. So I think that it's something that we must engage with in order to, we basically have to make these presumptions all the time.
What I'm getting is that faith to you is something that it's what we assume is real without direct confrontation with our senses. So if
I am being an empiricist, kind of, and like being like, this is the source of, I've kind of, that's been another implicit. If we're not hearing
it or seeing it or experiencing it,
I would
in
put
some
it this
direct
way. I guess maybe for me it is based on perception, and because that's the way I'm terming reality, or our source of reality, our credible source of reality. But whatever your credible source of reality is, the idea being that you can't engage with that and verify, actively put everything, say that you have a standard. My standard is perception. Your standard could be whatever you'd like it to be. Mm-hmm. But you can't actively be testing the trees, everything behind you against that standard. Anything that you're not... I mean, again, I'm
so different people have different standards of truth.
And we can't constantly be subjecting everything around us to these standards of truth and sort of continually verifying them.
Different standards of truth and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And knowledge, I think this isn't a epistemic kind of concern just as much as it is, a concern about truth, I think.
Okay.
It's how we know things.
Wow. So, would you? Sorry, this like
No, that's all right.
stops at certain times. It's an interesting conversation. I'll try not to keep you for too long.
No, that's all right.
I have a couple more questions. From what you just said, is that do you make a distinction between? Well, I'll put it like this. So there's maybe absolute knowledge, things like logical absolutes, like the law of identity, like something is what it is, or I am experiencing something,
Exactly,
something like that. But so does anything outside of that, of those sorts of things, those knowledge claims that we come to on a basis of evidence, maybe evidence such as I've been here many times before and looked at the trees behind me, and this everything that I see in front of me is trees. Maybe that's some evidence to suggest that the things behind me are trees. This whole building of knowledge and experiences and past experiences and all these sorts of things that make me feel comfortable in saying that I know that there's trees behind me. You see that as faith just as much as you see a belief in the tooth fairy as faith?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I do, because I think it's about what those things do functionally for the person. And while it might be hard for me to see the way in which a belief in the tooth fairy is advantageous, especially as compared to a belief in the trees behind you, which is very advantageous to not be questioning that. It might be unclear to me, but to those people it seems quite clear. So, not to be punny or whatever, but like I'll take their word for it. Faith that's useful to them. But I don't really distinguish between them, because I still think that just functionally the same sort of process is going, where there's some kind of presumption, some kind of premise that's being assumed, or some kind of suspension of some kind of investigative or interrogative process.
Wow.
So it's more about the suspension of an interrogative process, which is so natural.
Also known as like a leap of faith.
A leap of faith.
Yeah.
And while it's and so this is my point, and I'm very semantical. Like I'm very, very semantical. And this is a very semantical point to be insisting that there's no distinction between the kind of faith in a tooth fairy and the kind of faith that you have right now in the trees behind you. I mean, I'm sure that there is, but the point I'm trying to make is that this process of suspending our interrogation, while it comes very naturally to us, we should still identify it as such, as a process of suspending. You are right now suspending your interrogation of many things, of the idea, like you're not worrying about whether or not there are legs attached to me under this table. You're suspending, you're suspending those things so that you can focus on this conversation. So it's a matter of necessity in the way that we as humans function, which is why in the sort of getting into this idea, I talked about faith as being endemic or inseparable to the human condition, rather than say being inseparable from only religion. That's far too specific. It's a very, very broad tool in our toolbox as humans, in our toolbox of consciousness and how our consciousness works.
Would you say that maybe there's a spectrum for how much we suspend our level of interrogation on a certain claim? So, for example, I mean, there was all that stuff that I mentioned before. Also, I have like a front-facing camera right here that's showing me trees behind me.
Right.
It could be that.
And you're not, and instead of interrogating like the lack of the vision of the trees behind you, you're not interrogating the image that you're seeing in the camera. Like whatever it is, you're still making some presumption here that like
I'm making a presumption that this is accurately reflecting the what's behind me and stuff like that. But I think on some level I trust this just about as much as I trust my own eyes. You know what I mean? Like the fact that this camera is recording everything that's happening behind me. And
my point is that trust
doesn't waver too much from. But what I guess what I'm getting at is that, or my question, because I should be asking questions. Do you trust your senses on some level?
Well, I think it goes back to, for me, I am very, very interested in, again, descriptive as opposed to prescriptive. Like I see all too often people, because I'm interested in philosophy, and there's a lot of people interested in philosophy, and a lot of those people are very interested in prescriptive knowledge and things like that. So I don't really see it that way. And wait, sorry, what was the question again?
The question was just that, and this.
Oh, can I trust my senses?
Yeah, because what I'm saying is that, you mentioned I'm suspending some sort of interrogation when I think about you having legs under this table. I did see you walk up to the table, but your legs could have vanished at this point. But I'm just assuming that they're there.
Right.
What I'm saying is that me using my my knowledge of past events, or my memory rather, to assume that you have legs under there, it's just 1 degree less reliable as me actually seeing your legs.
And so the problem,
and even me seeing your legs isn't for me 100% absolute verification.
And so I agree with that. So I mean, I don't see perception as being a credible source of an objective reality.
Credible in the sense that it's absolute.
Well, in the sense that our conception of some absolute reality external to the self, which I would also argue is outside of our realm of sort of verifiable experience. But so, I mean, I don't see it as, should I trust my senses? I see it more as, do I want to continue living life? Do I want to get up from this table and go on my walk and not worry about whether or not the path is real in front of me? And well, yeah, I do want to do that. So I don't see it. So again, I see these questions veering, and I can't quite put my finger on how, but I do see it as veering more towards a prescriptive conversation about like maybe how things ought to be, or how reality ought to be, or how truth ought to be thought about. And I don't know anything about any of that. I wish I did. I really do. But what I do know is that like as a matter of functionality, I have to suspend whatever kind of interrogation that I could very aptly subject my perceptions to. Because, I'm sure you are aware, just as I am, that people do interrogate the validity of one's senses. And I mean, I was very into that when I was younger. I do not at all trust on a theoretical level my ability to give some kind of absolute authority to my perceptions. I certainly don't. This could all be a fever dream, a very vivid hallucination that in the fever dream I'm not aware is even possible, or whatever. Like we could go off endlessly there are all kinds of fun thought experiments. And so again,
about
on a theoretical,
be,
on a theoretical level, I'm very mistrusting of nearly everything. I mean, it's very bleak in the theoretical realm for me, which is why I've kind of quite early on fled over from prescriptive things to descriptive things. And then now I feel a little bit better about just saying, well, I don't quite know why, or I don't know if I should be able to, in a logical sense, trust my perceptions, but I'm certainly going to today. I'm doing it right now. I will continue doing it for the rest of the day. I imagine that I will for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I see it as a matter of necessity, and and I'm comfortable in that realm, because then I see this other realm as that's not viewing things in that way, as getting more and more into the drawer that I have in my mind of things that I just can't answer, unanswerable questions. So this might
produce some cognitive dissonance in a person if they claim to know things that are essentially unknowable.
I think it does, and I think there's a lot of people with that cognitive dissonance, and I think that there's benefits you can get from that. I mean, personally, I wish that I wasn't so skeptical, and I wish that I believed in the Christian God that I was raised on. It would be awesome if I thought that I was...
So this is mainly a source of suffering for you.
Absolutely. Okay. Ignorance is bliss.
All right. So you're 100% confident that there are unknowable things. That is a foundational part of how you...
view life. I view life as that
act.
That's everything. And then there's this tiny little window that's not that.
Okay.
But most everything is in that unknowable category for me.
So that's how you operate. And So my question, I guess, is what could be true? What would take you from 100? What would lower your confidence in that, in a sense? So, like, what could you find out
if God spoke to me?
If God spoke to you,
yeah, divine. And to that's anecdotal, but theoretically,
how would you know it's God speaking to you?
Divine intervention of some kind. I mean, I think that there are certain tenets of I do have conception. As a matter of necessity, I do have ideas about what reality looks like, what reality is, basically the nature of reality on a functional level. If something fundamentally challenged everything I think that I know about reality, if I was just like taken up into the sky right now and like this voice was speaking in my head and I was waiting to wake up from my DMT trip, I finally did it, or I guess I didn't even know, but I'd be waiting and it never comes. Well, then maybe through that experience I would certainly be willing to come way down from 100. Okay. And if there was someone out there who's omniscient, then I would think, okay, well then it's the possibility that there are unknowable things is zero because there's somebody who knows it all. But
so it would take an extraordinary experience to change your confidence that nothing is unknowable, because if you found out that an omniscient God exists, is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the word that I was using. Yeah, omniscient, omnipotent, but in other words, all-knowing. Like if there was an all-knowing being that revealed itself to me,
omnipotent is maybe the only word you have to use.
Sure,
to be all-powerful, maybe. You have to
absolutely
be all-knowing, but.
So if that
is the only thing that could
then
convince you that.
Well, something like that. Those are the terms I put it in because, I mean, again, it's kind of a tough position to put me in to give an example of what could change my opinion, because I do feel so strongly about it. My number is currently sitting at 100.
100, right.
So it is hard to imagine what that would be, and I would give it the terming of something like divine intervention, and I say something like because maybe I'm giving
curious, does it have to be an experience that involves a being that knows everything, or could it be waking up from a DMT trip that would lower your confidence?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of something else that would shake up my confidence. So I guess what would really be the through line there is something that fundamentally
how would waking up from a DMT trip lower your confidence that there are unknowable things?
Or, well, no, maybe not DMT trip, but more the example of like some kind of alien scenario of like, it's not DMT, it's like the, it's like this being that we would consider almost godlike in comparison to us. Okay. It would be like their equivalent of a DMT trip would be you like take some tab and then you experience the lifetime of Will Conant, which is me, and then you wake up and it was like, oh man, how was Will Conant? Was it good? And they're like, yeah, it was crazy, dude. But like, it's just one little blip in that, much higher being's existence. It's a trivial kind of experience living my lifetime because maybe, in this metaphor,
their lifetime is 100,000 years.
Eternal, or 100,000 years. Sure, even 100,000 years would certainly dilute my lifetime. So it could be many things. It wouldn't be waking up. It wouldn't necessarily be waking up from a DMT trip. That would just change my conceptions of what I think a DMT trip could be.
Okay.
That would evolve my conception of what I think a DMT trip could be, but it wouldn't change my fundamental idea that there are unknowable things. That I think that number would still be 100 if I woke up from a DMT trip. Now, if I woke up from a Will Conant trip as some alien being, maybe I would that number would come down.
Why?
That number would come down, or I guess I can't even say that. I would have to evaluate that when I woke up.
It would probably change a bunch of things.
Yeah, I'm sure it would change many things.
Everything would change. I'm just imagining that if I woke up from either a DMT trip or the more extraordinary example of waking up in some alien society where you're
something we would
immortal,
consider godlike, but some kind of eternal being.
I think from what I'm gathering, your ideas about unknowable things are, I think, the only thing that would sway me is if I encountered a being that knew everything and they could somehow convince me of that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's why your first example of the God thing made sense to me. But
yeah, maybe that's the only thing. I guess that is. So yeah, I was trying to make it more broad, but I guess it really is as narrow as something that we would call divine, some kind of divine intervention, because I think you're correct in sort of pointing out that in my worldview that I'm establishing, it really would take something that is all-knowing and, kind of two components. Like, they've got to be all-knowing and they've got to be able to somehow...
express that to you.
Yeah, confer that reality to me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that would be the only thing that would convince me. Otherwise, I would still say I'm confronted with the alien that's, from the DMT trip kind of a pair of examples, and they're what I would consider godlike, but not godlike in the sense that they're omnipotent, fully omnipotent, then maybe they wouldn't meet that standard that we just established. Yeah. I would actually say, well, you know a lot, but I still don't think you know everything. And I still think that there are things that are unknowable.
Okay. Hey, man, I think I understand your position well enough. That was a great conversation.
That was. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming over here
and
giving me some of that. I think... If you're okay with it, I'm definitely going to post this one.
Sure.
No, man. It's not every day I'm doing sort of my favorite hike and somebody's like, do you want to talk about epistemology? Like, it's a dream come true.